Hey guys, welcome to another video from Historic Militaria. Today I wanted to take a look at sort of my version of an unboxing video, and this would be of an FP-45 American Liberator from World War II. So for those of you that don't know, the Liberator was a mass-produced single-shot pistol which had no rifling and made in 45 ACP, and the idea was to make a really cheap handgun which would be dropped into enemy territory for use by untrained resistance fighters to sneak up on an enemy, shoot them, and steal their weapon. Sounds like a really good idea in practice, but it really never panned out. And so what happened was, actually in 1942, 1 million of these were made in 11 weeks by the General Motors Guide Lamp division, and the gun was actually designed by George Hyde, who is a pretty prolific American firearms designer, primarily of submachine guns. He's best known, I would say, for the M3 grease gun, which was a very standard weapon during World War II, which also owes a lot to the Liberator in that it was very stamped, very cheap looking, very cheap to produce, but it's extremely effective. So let's go ahead and just take a look at this gun a little bit closer. The first thing you're going to notice is it comes in this waxed paper box with a picture of the gun on the front and with a little animated firing thing. And actually, the FP-45 stands for flare projector or flare pistol. I've heard both versions. And that was to disguise the fact that this was going to be a mass-produced weapon dropped into enemy territory. And the other side of the box is just plain. And this one obviously has been opened on this side. And what you got was, of course, your pistol, which is extremely crude, and again, a single shot, no rifling in the barrel, no serial numbers or marks of any kind. The way this would operate is you would cock this piece here in the back, you'd actually pull it out and turn it, and then you would action this lever right here, which also is the rear sight. As you can see, there's a relatively crude rear sight and your front sight. You pop that up, drop a single round of 45 ACP into your gun, close that back up, and your gun would then be cocked. Then you'd sneak up on the enemy and you would shoot them. And obviously not the best trigger, but it does the job. The problem with these, if you own one today, is that there's no user serviceable parts inside of them. These are stamped and welded shut, so it's not like you can disassemble it to fix anything that might go wrong. That's why I would recommend probably just leaving it for display and enjoying the fact that you own one of these. They are clunky. They are not, I can't imagine these are very fun to shoot, but they did have a hollow handle where you could store 5 rounds of 45 ACP. This plate comes off and this would be empty and you put your shells in there. Also, the guns came with a dowel. This is just a wood dowel that would be used to knock out your spent shell so you could reload. I can just kind of picture sneaking up on some German sentry in some really quiet French town in the middle of the night, shooting him with a 45 ACP and alerting every sentry within, what, half a mile of that sentry that now a gunshot had just gone off. So I can't really see these being super effective weapons, especially when you had better things that were being dropped, such as the Sten submachine gun and even grease guns later in the war, and just kind of all kinds of weapons that were floating around. Also, you got 10 rounds of 45 ACP ammo packed with the gun in a plain cardboard box, and the head stamp on these is going to be FA42 will be the proper head stamp, because these guns were all made in 1942. I'm not going to say that's the only head stamp that would be correct for these, but that is the only verified head stamp I've ever seen on ammunition which was packed with Liberators. So you're looking at brass cased, obviously ball ammunition with an FA-42 head stamp. And these rounds are going to be packed pointing out, so they're going to be packed with the primers facing each other inside this box. The box is pretty fragile, so we'll just leave it, but it's got the other 9 rounds in it. And then, of course, the best part of these is your instruction comic strip, which is in no words, but just shows how the gun actually functions. And these are widely reproduced, so do be careful if you're contemplating a purchase of one of these. This one is not a reproduction, but it is in pretty fragile shape, like most are after 80 some years, and it just shows how the gun is going to operate, and really anyone who can look at pictures can figure out how to use one of these. So the operational usage of these was obviously fairly limited. About 1 million were made, like I said, in 11 weeks in 1942, and about 500,000 went to the European theater and about 500,000 went to the Pacific theater, of which records really weren't kept of where they went. I have certainly heard of deployment in France to the French resistance. It wasn't a great number. Apparently some went to the Greeks later on and sort of showed up at various points in Europe, but not many. Maybe 25,000 were distributed, if that. And the balance of the 500,000 were destroyed soon after the war because nobody wanted to use them. In terms of the Pacific theater, you're looking at about 500,000 that went there, and apparently quite a few went to China and the Philippines. So I have actually seen examples that have come out of the Philippines and come out of China. How many are still floating around out there? You know, anyone's guess. But they did see some service. How much and how effective is really open for debate. Again, there were much better weapons, and there were a lot of weapons floating around at the time. Again, most were destroyed, scrapped. It wasn't really a success. They cost about $2.10 in 1942 dollars to make, which is about, what, $35 today. So you figure the U.S. government spent about $35 million on the program for really no great results, but a very interesting collector's piece today. These guns are, I'm going to say they're actually fairly common today. You do see them quite frequently for sale at auction, or some of the higher end gun stores will have them. They are interesting guns. They are not, as I said, they're not super duper rare. They are pretty rare to see in the box, and this is a very nice example of one. And you can see, you can't see, but it's got, like I said, no rifling in there, no serial number, no marks whatsoever. So they are sort of just an interesting side note to the U.S. during World War II and what we were trying to do. And an interesting idea that really never went anywhere. Some of you may know that in the Vietnam era, the CIA decided to make the deer gun, which was a 9mm version of the Liberator, and that similarly went nowhere. Those guns are actually incredibly rare and bring a much higher price than Liberators, since very few of those survived. One other thing I will add is you will often see a piece of wood which would go in your box, and this was just to keep things from rattling around. So you would open the box and then discard this piece of wood. But if you find one in the box and it's got a piece of wood, don't trash that. That is an original piece, so always do keep that around. Hope you've enjoyed taking a look with me at a Liberator and everything that came with it. Hope you've learned something. And as always, remember to like and subscribe, and we'll be looking at more various interesting militaria in the near future. Thanks for watching.